Welcome back. In this series of videos on group formation and agency, we've talked about forming as a group when the students first get there to school. We've talked about storming, and now we're going to talk about norming. And this is, you might say, the beautiful spot. It doesn't mean it's always smooth, but this is where we as adults step in and begin to give them agency, give them procedures to help decide for themselves. We're guiding them and we're keeping everybody safe, but emotionally and otherwise, but we're also helping them make those decisions. At some point in that time when they're frustrated and there's a specific problem, for instance, I may sit them down. It may be in the classroom, even though some of the stuff may be going outside, or maybe the problem's in the classroom. I will sit them down, usually like in a rug situation where they're sitting on the rug and we're in a group setting. And I'll say, hey, I've noticed, X, Y, and Z has happened, and there have been some unhappy people, and it's understandable. And I've noticed that some people are really working hard to try to make this work, but it doesn't always happen. So I was wondering if you would like some help with that. And I see that you've tried to make some rules or whatnot. And what do you want to do about this? And typically, they're really ready for this conversation. So you start by simply opening it up. What kind of classroom do you want to have? What kind of group do you want to have this year, for this school year? And they will usually have a lot to say. And some years I have actually written it down on chart paper, and some years I haven't. It's just a conversation. But it's the beginning point for them to begin to have a voice and agreeing and disagreeing on what's important in their classroom. And it typically goes pretty well. At that point, we might scratch the rules that I had set up and say, all right, let's set those aside. That's all that stuff's still important, but I'm going to let you guys make the rules for this classroom. And they typically like that a lot. Now, what I will say is, if you understand that as the adult here, I may have to step in sometimes and make decisions for you, then I will do my best. If you agree to that I sometimes make the decisions, then I will do my best to help you guys make, these decisions for yourself as a group as much as possible. Do you want to make that agreement with me? I will stay back out of it. I will guide you, but I will let you make the decisions as long as you understand that there are times when the teacher has to make the decision and that you'll be okay when that happens. And they're like, yes. I've never had a group say, no, we want to make all the decisions. They recognize that teachers generally make the decisions. But once you have given them that agency and word, then at that point, you begin helping them know what that means. So, for instance, they might decide to write a lot of rules, and you might write them down and help them sort them out and all of that. In our classroom, sometimes this came along right about the time the children were trying to establish leadership. And so I would say, well, other classes have had a country and we've had a government that, everybody helped make the laws and they kind of, watched over each other that way. And usually there's somebody there who's like, yes, let's do that. Now that's a different thing. But it's just the way I approached it because they were so motivated. And in that case, I guided them in talking about the different kinds of governments. And there was this whole thing, and I can share an article with you on more about how I did that. But that's not necessary as long as there is some way for them to feel empowered. Like, yes, this is our classroom. And yes, the teacher is going to help us, but we get to make the decisions whenever possible. And that's when you guide them through creating norms for the classroom. And for anytime. And it's not everything, we all know there's always a struggle about who stands in line where and some things like that. And some of that stuff just never goes away. But yet there can be student created rules or laws or whatever you call them that help guide the students. During this time, I'm going to be giving them tasks to do. Actually, I don't have to give them tasks. In my master's program, we learned about all these activities that you can give, whether it's adults or children, to learn to work together and learn to create, norms, for instance. But when you're in forest school, you don't have to plan it because they come up with their own projects and their own goals. and you're there as someone who can watch over it and say, hey, remember what we talked about? You guys wanted to learn how to work together. You want to start now? And they're like, well, yeah. And so you start by helping them learn to listen to each other, helping them learn to reflect back what they hear. You draw attention to the other children's faces. What do you think their feelings are about this? Especially if there's somebody who's maybe been a little hurtful. And you just start guiding them through stuff. And I'm trying to think of examples, because I know if this is new, it can be it sounds complex, but it's really not. It's, instead of us telling them, hey, what happened, and getting, child A did this, okay, tell me. And then child B, okay, let me hear from you. And then I make the verdict and I say, well, it sounds to me like blum, 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 and you guys need to do this or that, which is, when we are in a typical school situation, we don't have time to really sit with the kids and take 20 minutes to listen to everybody and get other kids involved and let them have their say, and then help each other be empathic with, noticing each other's feelings and all of this. But in forest school, that's where you can really work on that. And so you can draw attention. Well, I see, your friend looks really sad. Did you notice that? And then, hey, did you know that when you did such and such that they were going to react like that? Well, no. Okay. Well, if you had known what he's saying now, that he wouldn't have done that had he known, would you have blown up at him when he did that? And they're like, well, no. And so you're like, well, have you ever just wished you could just try again? And they're like, yeah, that'd be good. I say, well, you want to do that? Yeah. And off they go, and they'll try again and get it better. Now, that's a positive outcome. It's not always, with everybody happy. And there are times in forest school where the teacher just has to say, you know what, you're not ready. I can see you're not ready to deal with this situation. So as the adult, I'm going to ask you to come over here and stay in this smaller area. And you might designate the boundaries between 3 or 4 trees where they can move around, but it's very small, like the size of a bedroom or smaller. And you say, until you're not ready today. And so I'm not, what I'm saying is, you still have to step in, and you still have to put up boundaries for children who aren't able, because we know a lot of children, whether they're on the spectrum or whether they're just maybe having a really bad day, they can't go there. They really aren't ready. And so you're not trying to punish. You're just saying, hey, I can see this is where you need to be for now. And they typically will calm down and most of the time be ready to come out of that. But I've had some that have to be in there sometimes several days in a row and they can play with stuff there on the ground until they are ready to listen a little bit better and things. I know it's not easy, but in general, during the forest school time, we help them walk through and talk about what's happening, and we help them make compromises. And you have to talk about, do you guys know what a compromise is? Or you might say, wow, did you hear what she just said? That is a compromise. She's going to give up a little bit, and she's asking you to give up a little bit. Nobody gives up everything, but everybody gives up a little bit. That way the project can continue. Isn't that smart? And some things like that can come out that, and it helps to have read the book. And I can share in the comments below the books that I read during my master's program that were really helpful explaining these stages and the kinds of tasks, for instance, that they need to do together, such as learning to compromise. There's games you can do for that, but forest school will bring it to you. It's for us, it's knowing kind of how to guide them. And I highly recommend looking into this, because once they have learned the norms and they have helped create those norms, they will govern themselves somewhat and they feel empowered. And so yeah, that's what I recommend. Anyway, that's the norming phase, and you're going to be doing that off and on all year long because they're learning. And so thank you for hanging in there with me as I stumbled through this. Bye-bye. I'll see you in the next video.